It's a fact. The majority of police officers and law enforcement workers, they tend to vote conservative or Republican. Call me a fool, but the stats don't lie. The question is why? Well, there is a reason why, or there's actually three reasons why, and I'm going to go over them with you. This is going to make some people angry. So let me start by at least acknowledging the diversity of political opinions within law enforcement. Of course, but there's definitely a trend of conservative voting patterns among police officers. And I'm not going to argue over stats in this video either. I'll post some in the description, but it's a fact. And I want to focus on the reasoning why. As someone who spent over 20 years as a police officer and grew up in a police family around law enforcement, and as someone who's been accused of being a liberal puppet and pushing a right-wing agenda all from the same video, I'll add some of my own personal stories and I'll try to make it relatable. I've talked plenty of politics with police officers over the year during an election, and many have said that even though they may not agree with the Conservatives on every issue, they absolutely will not vote for any other party than the Conservatives because of what they've seen as a cop, as a police officer. I'm talking about tougher on crime policies. They've seen firsthand, I've seen firsthand, innocent people victimized by repeat offenders on the streets, at work, on transit, even in their own homes. They don't necessarily identify as conservatives, whatever that even means, but they wouldn't consciously vote for any other person or political party that doesn't push tough on crime policies, who don't openly support the police. The police officers, they have families, kids they tuck in at night before they go to work. And the thought of a dangerous repeat offender doing anything at all to their family while they're at work protecting the public, working hard to get those dangerous repeat offenders off the streets, it plays in their mind the entire shift. One guy said they'd rather pay another $50 a month in taxes and at least know that the person is being locked up where they belong. So they could even be at odds with themselves in terms of who they're going to vote for as president or what party they would vote for in terms of electing a prime minister. But they're putting their personal and their family's safety first, as well as their career. I mean, they're probably not going to vote for the party who isn't publicly against defunding the police. I'm going to go over three reasons why law enforcement personnel tend to lean and tend to vote conservative or Republican. Number one, law and order. I basically spoke about this in my intro, but first and foremost, police officers support law and order. It's the job. So when a party comes in saying we need stricter penalties for criminals or tougher laws, more support for police, that's going to resonate. We hear the term catch and release thrown around these days because that's exactly what's happening. No more catch and relief, but a tough on crime position. It doesn't necessarily mean you want to build more super jails to house anybody who steps out of line to spend the rest of their lives. I've spoken about this in the past. There's also rehabilitation, proper rehabilitation, learning a trade, new skills which boost their self-esteem and self-confidence and make people want to become productive citizens. You can believe in both. It doesn't have to be one or another. We're sitting in for a parade one day. That's what it's called when a bunch of police officers, they get together before their shift and they're given their details for the day, given their call signs. They find out who the partner's going to be. You see it on TV sometimes. Your patrol zone. And the staff sergeant working, he was going over some of the changes to arresting and releasing individuals, which were starting almost immediately. Moving forward, police officers on the road would very rarely be bringing people to the station to be held on a show cause or held for court. As long as certain criteria was met, and it was pretty damn easy to meet, the person must be released on scene, or else it would actually be police who got in trouble. And it was like that, light and day. We were releasing people, and my partners and I, other cops, we would be looking at one another because it just didn't feel right. You knew this person was going to reoffend, but the change was instantaneous back in 2019, I believe. So it's no surprise police will naturally vote for individuals or parties who support strong criminal justice measures, including crime prevention and crime reduction. This aligns with the core mission of law enforcement. Number two, political support for police. Well, let's be real here. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about defunding the police, limiting their powers, and pushing for major reforms. Whether you agree or disagree with that, the fact is, one party is much more vocal about the support for the police. And most cops I know, most cops I speak to, also agree that we need policing reform. Maybe even reallocating some funds and to services or programs which may ultimately reduce crime. But it all gets lost when people start screaming about defunding the police. A lot of officers also come from military backgrounds or law enforcement backgrounds, families, and they've been raised with strong values like patriotism, discipline. They don't want the government overreaching into their personal lives. I think that it might be more so in the US and Canada, but I could be wrong. I grew up around police officers and all kinds of emergency services personnel. And if anything, I was more rebellious as a kid and adult because I've been around them my entire life. I have a high level of comfort ever since a young age around police of all ranks. I started out that way, and that's not always a good thing. Number 3, self-defense laws, including the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment's relevant to the US, of course, but the subject and the discussion, it's also relevant to Canadians. A lot of police officers believe in the right to bear arms and strong self-defense laws, and they see them as going hand in hand, not just for themselves, but for law-abiding citizens. One party seems to be the one protecting these rights, while the other one pushes for more restrictions. And that makes a difference, especially in the US. The Second Amendment rights, they are a key issue in election platforms in the US. I made a video about it, and it got quite a bit of traction, where I talk about some of the differences in laws between Canada and US, and I'll link it up here. And whether you agree with what I'm saying here or not, it doesn't really matter because it's not my opinion, it's a fact. A large percentage of Canadians want self-defense laws and firearms laws similar to the laws in the US. I'm talking about your rights if you're attacked on the street or if your home or business is broken into. Your rights when it comes to using force to protect yourself or your family. The problem is that people take these conversations to the extreme, or they twist your words to suit their own agenda. I grew up around hunters, I grew up around firearms, and it's no big deal to me. But I don't know one responsible firearm owner that thinks anybody should be able to go and buy a gun without proper checks and balances. We do need updated and we need clear self-defense laws in Canada. If somebody comes into your house and intends to do harm to you or your family, it should be a no-brainer. It's them or it's you, and that should not be controversial. I spoke about this as well. I was in Florida not too long ago and walking around with people who were armed, and they weren't police or even off-duty police officers, and I felt comfortable the entire time. I felt more comfortable walking around there in their city than I do in my own city at times. I've covered this in previous videos. There's no need for me to rehash it. I went over 3 main reasons. If you search online or ask AI to provide the top 5 or 10 reasons why police tend to vote conservative or Republican, I'm pretty sure the response will be pretty similar to what I gave here. So does this mean every cop is conservative or Republican? Of course not. Plenty of officers vote liberal, progressive, or somewhere in between. I actually had no intentions of even filming this video. There was a bit of a back and forth in a bit of a debate in the comment section, and I took the idea. I stole the idea. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Please let me know in the comments. Be safe out there, look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.